In the Muffin Reads series, I intend to take you on journeys into myths, legends, and other fascinating stories from the past in a bite-sized, easy-to-digest, and uncomplicated way. Some of these stories you may recognise from the telly or movies, but don't worry, we won't need tens of hours to tell them, and the only special effects needed are those of your own imagination. The first Muffin Reads I've selected, and feel free to suggest future reads, is the Saga of the Volsungs. This is an influential tale, actually a series of connected tales, that has fed into the works of Wagner, Tolkien, and many more. The saga comes to us from an unknown Icelandic author in the 13th century, but is evidently much older. If you want to delve deeper into the origins and broader history of the work, I can recommend Jesse L. Bayek's translation. Link in the description. Once upon a time, there were two men, Siguer and Skadi. Of the two, Siguer had the most renown, and it was said that he was the son of Odin. Skadi owned a thrall named Bredi, who was just as skilled and accomplished as his social betters, and in some cases even surpassed them. So it was that Siguer and Bredi went hunting for an entire day, and compared their kills in the evening. It turned out that Bredi's kills were better than those of Siguer, and at this Siguer became outraged. How dare a mere thrall outdo him? In his anger, he attacked and killed Bredi. On his return, Siguer told Skadi that Bredi had ridden away into the forest. "He was soon out of my sight, and I don't know where he went." Skadi didn't quite believe Siguer, so he gathered some men and formed a search party for his lost thrall. The party found Bredi's body, hidden in a snowdrift, with the wounds that Siguer had inflicted upon him. Siguer was declared an outlaw and was no longer permitted to remain at home with his father. Odin took Siguer and led him on a journey of epic length to a site where a manned fleet of warships lay. Siguer took command of these warships and warriors, and with them he carved out a kingdom for himself. He became a powerful king, ruling Hunland, and took a wife. He had a son named Rerir, who grew up to be a strong and capable warrior. In his later years, Siggy's brothers-in-law became jealous about him and made war against the king. They overthrew and killed him, slaying all of Siggy's warriors except Rerir, who was not with his father at the time. Rerir raised an army of his own, from friends and allied chieftains, to seek vengeance upon his maternal uncles. He took back his father's kingdom, and then gathered an even greater army. With this, he attacked his uncle's domains, visiting horrific destruction upon them until his father's killers were dead, and their lands forfeit. Rerir's kingdom thus became greater than his father's, but although he had seized a woman to be his lover from the courts of his uncles, he could not sire a child. In despair, he and his lover called out to the gods, and Frigg overheard their prayers, and let them be known to Odin. Odin decided to help the couple. He called upon Hjod, daughter of the giant Hrimnir, a wish maiden, and gave her a magical apple to take to Rerir. The wish maiden transformed into a crow and brought the apple to Rerir, dropping it into his lap. Feeling its magical nature, Rerir returned to his home. Eating some of the apple, he went to visit his queen. With the magic of Odin's apple in play, Rerir and his queen were soon expecting, but the pregnancy lasted longer than is natural. Before his child was born, with his queen in great distress, Rerir had to go on campaign to pacify his kingdom. Unfortunately, on campaign, the king took sick and died. The pregnancy continued for 6 years, with growing agony for the queen. Knowing that she was at the end of her life, she asked her unborn child to be cut from her. The child was well grown inside her when this happened, and then he kissed his mother before she died. The child was named Volsung, and he ruled over Hunland as his father had done before him. Like his ancestors, he grew to be big and strong and became a great warrior and king. He fought many battles and won victory in them all. On reaching adulthood, the giant Hrimnir sent Hlod to Volsung, and Wishmaiden and King were married. Long and fruitful was their marriage, producing 10 sons and 1 daughter. The oldest son was named Sigmund, and the daughter was Signy, and they were twins. Although all of the children of Volsung achieved renown and performed great deeds, Sigmund and Signy were still the fairest and most celebrated of them all. The king of Gautland at the time was Siguer, and he visited Volsung to ask for Signy's hand in marriage. Signy was not impressed by Siguer, but she put the matter into her father's hand. Volsung felt that a betrothal to Siguer would help to ally the two kingdoms, and so agreed to the proposal. Volsung had a great palace constructed around a huge tree, which grew from the centre of the halls and its branches reaching up through the roof. This mighty tree was named Barnstock. It was in this hall that Volsung entertained Siguer and his men, celebrating the king's betrothal to his daughter. During the feasting, a strange man entered the hall. He was dressed in a hooded, mottled cape, walked barefoot, and had only one eye. No one in the hall knew him. The stranger walked up to Barnstock and drew a very finely wrought sword. This he plunged up to its hilt into the mighty trunk of Barnstock and addressed the hall. "Whoever draws this sword receives it from me as a gift, and he shall never wield a finer blade." And with that, the stranger walked from the hall, and no one saw where he went from there. So fine was the blade that everyone in the hall was keen to draw it from Barnstock. After a bit of squabbling, the order of nobility determined who would attempt the feat before whom. Both kings tried and failed. The greatest of the nobles likewise attempted the feat, but the sword remained stuck fast in Barnstock's trunk. Then it came Sigmund's turn to try, and on grasping the hilt, the blade slid free. Siguer immediately offered 3 times the sword's weight in treasure to purchase the blade, but Sigmund rebuffed him. "If the sword was meant for you to carry, then you would have been able to draw it free from mighty Barnstock." Siguer was not happy, but he kept his schemes to himself. Siguer stayed in Hunland for the night, sleeping with Signy, as was expected of betrothal. In the morning he apologized to Volsung, stating that he wished to return to Gautland before the seas became too rough and impassable. Volsung agreed, not wishing to prevent an ally king from travelling as he wished. Signy implored her father to break the betrothal. "If not broken, even if not for my sake, this union will bring our family nothing but misery," she said. Volsung refused to break the betrothal. "You must not talk so, for going back on the bargain would be shameful, and we would make an enemy of Gautland rather than a friend." Before leaving, Siguer invited Volsung to visit him in Gautland, as ally and kin by marriage, along with all of his sons and such men as he required to travel with, in 3 months' time, to make up for having to leave Hunland so early after the feasting. Volsung agreed, and Siguer sailed home with his new wife, Signy. So, in 3 months' time, Volsung set sail with his sons and his retinue for Gautland, and they spent the night on their arrival with their ships. Signy came to her father there, and told him of Siguer's treachery. "He has amassed an army against you, and will slay you in his trap should you take to the land. Please return home, and bring back a larger army with you, so you can break the trap and kill this treacherous king." But Volsung rebuffed his daughter. "I have become old not by fleeing my battles. I have fought with both larger and smaller armies than my enemies, and I have won all victories. I have no fear of dying, as all must die at some point, so no, daughter, I will not flee now, treachery or no." So Signy continued. "Then please let me stay among my kin. Do not make me go back to Siguer." But Volsung told her no. "You must of course return to your husband, whatever happens to us." And so, with heavy heart, Signy returned to Siguer's hall. When Volsung and his men set foot on the land in the morning, they indeed found Siguer's army waiting for them. Volsung had ordered his men to put on their armour and to take up their arms before leaving the ships, and so they were ready for the fight. The battle was fierce, and Volsung's men broke through Siguer's lines several times, only to be pushed back before they were finally surrounded. Volsung was killed on the battlefield, and his 10 sons, including Sigmund, were taken prisoner. Signy learned of her father's death and the capture of her brothers, and she spoke to Siguer privately. "Please, do not put my brothers to death quickly, but instead put them into stocks, for I wish to see them alive for longer, as was the saying, the eye takes pleasure while it yet beholds marks." Siguer agreed, saying, "You must be mad to wish to prolong your brothers' deaths with such torture, but I will do this because I will take pleasure in seeing them suffer more before they die." And so a great trunk was formed into stocks within the woods, and all 10 brothers were shackled to it. There they stayed bound, and all through the day, and all into the night. When midnight came, an old she-wolf of dire aspect came into the clearing where the brothers' stocks stood. She came to one of the brothers, bit him to death, and then ate every last piece of him. In the morning, Signy sent a trustworthy servant to check on her brothers, and on his return he reported what had happened. Every morning after that, for the next 8 days, Signy sent the same servant to check on her brothers, and every time he returned to tell another had been killed and eaten. Only Sigmund now remained. Signy sent her servant to Sigmund with a pot of honey, and told him to smear it over Sigmund's face and into his mouth. This he did, and that night, as usual, the she-wolf arrived and approached Sigmund with the intent of biting and consuming him as she'd done to his brothers. But instead, on scenting the honey, the she-wolf licked Sigmund's face and then reached up her tongue into his mouth. Sigmund remained steady and bit into the she-wolf's tongue. She pulled back, attempting to escape, but Sigmund was too strong, so she placed her paws against the trunk and pulled harder with that leverage, and the stocks broke apart. Sigmund was now free, but still remained holding onto the wolf's tongue with his teeth. Eventually, she pulled so hard that her tongue was wrenched from her head, and she was killed. Legends say that the she-wolf was actually King Siguer's mother, turned into a wolf through witchcraft and sorcery. I hope you have enjoyed this first episode of Muffin Reads, the Saga of the Volsungs. For further episodes, please remember to subscribe and switch notifications on. Also, check the rest of my channel where you'll find music and more. If you have any suggestions for further tales for Muffin Reads, please feel free to comment below.